Kaivalya Navaneeta continued. Disciple, I do not see the propriety of the statement that all beings are permeated by a single non-dual self, which is all-embracing as being, consciousness, bliss. The existence of the jivas is clear because they all say, I. Consciousness also is clear because of knowledge, which is obvious. Why does not bliss show forth in a similar way? Master, although there are shape, fragrance, and softness together present in the same flower, each of them is cognized by a separate sense only. Otherwise, they are not perceived. Such is the law of nature. Similarly, though the beatific qualities, being, consciousness, and bliss together form the self, yet the modes vary constantly and give rise to the differences which appear as the world. The three qualities, sattva, rajas, and tamas, give rise to the three modes, repose, agitation, and ignorance respectively. Being, consciousness, and bliss, which are themselves glorious, always remain a homogeneous whole, yet appear different. Bare existence alone is noticed in plants, minerals, and the earth, which look insentient and are ignorant. There can be no happiness in the state of disturbance caused by passions such as lust, which act like poison. But being and consciousness are evident in it. Being, consciousness, and bliss together become manifest in the state of peace, which is characterized by a stern detachment from externalities. Therefore, bliss becomes clear in a peaceful mind, rid of ignorance and agitation. Disciple, Lord, who has appeared as my master in the world, I do not clearly understand the character of being, consciousness, bliss. Sat Chit Ananda. What is this Sat? What is Chit? And what is Ananda? Master, Sat, being, is that which does not perish at any time, past, present, or future. Chit, consciousness, is that which cognizes the different objects. Ananda, bliss, is the joy arising out of the experience of bliss during the enjoyment of an object of desire. Disciple: Master, who demolishes the forts of the sheaths, although the Mahavakyas in the 4 Vedas declare, Thou art Sat Chit Ananda to the indweller in the mortal body, and masters say, Thou art Brahman, yet how can one experience I am Sat Chit Ananda? Master: When it is said that rebirths are the inevitable results of past actions, does it not follow that the person was existent in the past? Again, should heaven and hell be the rewards of present actions, does it not follow that he will continue to exist in the future? A subtle body suited to heaven or hell, a celestial body, or a human body, which are all the results of illusion, often change and pass away. Always surviving the false body, it is but right to say that he is Sat. In the darkness covering deep sleep and night, when there is no sun or lamp, he is unmistakably aware of the darkness and objects. So, he is Chit. He is also Ananda because his love never fades for the incomparably beatific self, for love manifests only for an object of pleasure. Food, drink, and so forth are dear to all alike because pleasure is derived from them. The self is not likewise a means to beatitude. Should the self described above be classed along with other means of pleasure, where is the pleasure apart from the enjoyer thereof? Can the self be two? Love for sensual pleasure is evident, but the love for the self remains unrivaled. The love for sensual pleasures undergoes changes, whereas the intense love for the self remains unchanging. Sensual pleasures can be enjoyed or rejected, but who is there to accept or reject the self? The self can reject all other pleasures, but not reject itself. It is wrong to imagine that the self kills itself and gets rid of itself by committing suicide in a burning passion. He who kills the body cannot be the body given up by him. The disgust is for the body and never for the self. Wealth is much sought after, but a son is dearer than wealth. One's own body is dearer than a son. The senses are dearer than the body. The life breath is dearer than the senses, and the self is very much dearer than life itself. This self is the essence, and the other three selves, the secondary, who is the son, the illusory, the body, and the acting ones, the ego, successively increase in importance. At the time of one's death, the secondary self, namely the son, who succeeds to the father's estate, assumes prominence. At the time of nourishment, the illusory self, namely the body, is prominent. When a happy future life is desired, the acting self, that is, the ego, becomes prominent. But in the state of liberation, the self, to wit pure consciousness, is paramount. Even a tiger becomes a favorite when it is obedient, and a son is hated when he thwarts one. In this world, the things like straw, which are neither loved nor hated, are treated with indifference. But under no circumstances does the love of the stainless self diminish for anyone. Therefore, my son, investigate your true nature, which is unbroken bliss only, and realize the self. Disciple, how many kinds of ananda, bliss or sukha are there? Master, there are three kinds of ananda, bliss or sukha. Brahmananda, which shines as pure consciousness, e.g. in sleep. Vasanananda, which is present in reminiscence, and Vishayananda, which is the joy of gaining the desired object. However, others say that there are 8 kinds of ananda. The above 3 include the other 5 of the 8. I shall, nevertheless, tell you all these 8. 8 kinds of ananda included in the preceding 3 kinds. Vishaya Sukha, the pleasure of sensual enjoyment. Brahma Sukha, the bliss of dreamless sleep. Vasana Sukha, the remembrance of the above for a few minutes immediately after waking. Atma Sukha, the happiness which ensues on determining that the self is the dearest of all dear things. Mukhya Sukha, the bliss of Samadhi, when the veil of ignorance is completely lifted. Nija Sukha, the contentment which results from indifference. Advitiya Sukha, the happiness of holding on to the self to the exclusion of duality. Vidya Sukha, the happiness that results from the inquiry into the self in accordance with the scriptural texts. Delight of knowledge at the end. Master, now I shall describe their distinguishing characteristics. A man who is always exerting himself in the waking state seeks rest on his bed out of sheer exhaustion. Then his mind is well turned inwards, and in that state it reflects the image of the bliss of consciousness, which shines by itself. The pleasure which he then experiences represents objective pleasure. The person who, feeling objective pleasures, are poor because they involve the painful triads of enjoyer, enjoyment, and object enjoyed, keeps the mind in repose and falls into sleep like an eagle dropping into its nest, becomes one with the limitless transcendent being, and remains as the blissful self. This supreme state of bliss is unrivaled Brahmananda. That the bliss of deep sleep is Brahmananda is the statement of the scriptures. That some persons take elaborate care to provide themselves with downy beds to sleep on is the fact which supports it. That in that state all sense of right and wrong, of man or woman, of in or out, is totally lost, as at the time of the embrace of the beloved is the experience which confirms it. So it is Brahmananda, sure and certain. Disciple, Master, in this world of cause and effect, the experience of one cannot be felt by another. In deep sleep, the intellectual sheath has subsided, and the blissful sheath has the experience of happiness. Is it right that this experience should be remembered by the intellectual sheath which expresses it? Master, know that these two stand to each other in the relationship of melted ghee and solidified ghee. They differ in their limiting thoughts, but not in their intrinsic knowledge. The intellectual sheath, limited by the mind, and active in the waking state, and the blissful one made of the bliss of pure consciousness, which appears when the painful mind subsides in deep sleep, are not different from each other, just like rainwater and the water stored in a reservoir, or like sugar and syrup. Disciple: in that case, why should anyone lose hold of that non-dual bliss of Brahman and come out of it? Master: he is drawn out by the force of his past karma. The man who has just wakened from deep sleep does not immediately lose the happiness of sleep, for he does not bestir himself at once, nor forget the happiness. This short interval of peace, which is neither sleep nor waking, is the bliss of remembrance. At the instant the I am the body idea starts, he loses himself in the troubles of the world and forgets the bliss. His past karma brings on pain or pleasure. Peace results in equipoise. Everyone has experienced the state of void, of thoughts, and the pleasure consequent upon it. This is Nijananda. Can this be the bliss of Samadhi? No. The external moisture is not the water contained within the pot. This happiness of indifference is only the shadow of the bliss of yogic Samadhi cast upon the rising ego. When the ego subsides and Samadhi results, there is the state of repose in which the mind is not aware of the environment nor asleep, and the body stays stiff like a post. Of the happiness enjoyed by the sole sovereign of the world, the earthly Gandharvas and celestial Gandharvas, the brilliant Pitris, the gods existing from creation, the later gods and celestial chiefs, Indra, Brihaspati, Prajapati or Virat, or Hiranyagarbha or Brahma, each is 100 times as great as the preceding one. Yet all are fragmentary and like froth and foam in the waters of deluge of Brahmananda. Whosoever remains in the Turyatita state, the seventh and the highest plane, his experience of consciousness bliss is the same as that of Narada, Shuka, Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, and such others, free from duality or sleep. I have now told you of 5 kinds of Ananda. I shall later describe the bliss of knowledge. I have already described the bliss of the self as the dearest of all, and the bliss of the non-dual self while explaining Maya and Sat Chit Ananda. Tell me, have you any more doubts? Disciple: Master, if each of the terms Sat, Chit and Ananda of which you have spoken has characteristics of its own, how can the mind, which is already unsteady, be fixed on unity? I do not see that they are different words with the same meaning. Kindly show me how it is all an indivisible, homogeneous whole, like honey, which is uniform though gathered from different flowers by the bees. Master, is water tripartite because of its coldness, fluidity, and whiteness, that is transparency? Or is fire tripartite because of its light, heat, and redness? The Vedas have analyzed and dismissed the cosmos, beginning with the ether, as unsubstantial, insentient, and misery-laden. In contradistinction to this, and for easy understanding, they have described Brahman as Sat Chit Ananda, which is one only. The Vedas describe Brahman in affirmative terms as follows: eternal, whole, unique, the highest truth, the supreme, the repository, the source, peace, ever true, absolute, continuum of the source, dream and sleep states, and therefore the fourth, continuous or equal in all, the sight, the witness of all, knowledge, pure. The Vedas indirectly denote everlasting indweller, the reality, ether, light, the self, liberation, the Lord, subtle, and so on. In negative terms as the unmoving, untainted, immortal, immeasurable, unsullied, that which is beyond speech, non-insentient, the diseaseless, uncontaminated, incomparable, uninterrupted, unattainable by the mind or the senses, undivided, unborn, infinite, indestructible, that which is without qualities, undivided, that which is without limbs or parts, beginningless, bodiless, changeless, non-dual, and so on. When all these qualities, affirmatives or otherwise, are considered together in the right way, they point to one only, and there can be no other. Many may be the words to signify the same. Thus, Brahman signified by Sat, Chit and Ananda is one only. Realize this unity and remain as one undivided whole. Do not say to describe Brahman by qualities is like speaking of a barren mother. Can there be anyone so talented as to understand the nature of Brahman without being told? What the Vedas have revealed out of grace for gaining knowledge of Brahman and liberation in life are not qualities of Brahman, but Brahman itself. Disciple: Master, in accordance with the statement of the Shrutis, I have now understood beyond doubt that my self is the indivisible reality. If you will further establish it by arguments, the truth will be fixed in my mind like an iron spike driven into a living tree. Master, being must itself be consciousness. Should the consciousness be different from being, it must be non-existent. How then can the being be revealed? Again, consciousness must itself be being. If different from consciousness, it must be insentient. The insentient cannot exist by itself. Thus, being and consciousness, being identical, are also bliss. This is the most agreeable argument. Lit. Seminal line of reasoning. Otherwise, bliss would be non-existent and insentient, and there could be no experience of bliss, which is absurd. Question: how is Sat, which exists at all times, revealed? By itself or by another? Answer: by another. Question: is that other non-existent or existent? Answer: non-existent. Question: Fool, can the son of a barren woman effect anything? Answer: then let it be something existing, but different from the original Sat. Question: how is its existence revealed? You must say, by another. Will there be an end to this chain of existent things and their cognizers? Your answer is therefore untenable. So get rid of this false reasoning. Listen to the experience agreeable to scripture and reason. Since the bliss of profound sleep persists as memory, this bliss itself must be knowledge. There was nothing besides it. Existing in the dissolution and deep sleep, you witness the darkness of ignorance. Now, entering the heart, abide as the all-perfect self. In accordance with the teachings of the Master, the disciple, realizing that being, consciousness and bliss are but the same reality, which is homogeneous like the honey that is gathered from different sources, and was long fixed in samadhi. When he opened his eyes, he realized himself to be the screen on which moves the kaleidoscopic picture composed of the mobile and immobile objects of the universe.